listening to Season 5, Episode 4 of Vixen, a Black beauty and pop culture podcast. If you enjoy what you hear today, please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts. Today's episode is on artist and muse Lithofayne Pridgon. Now, let's start the show. Hey y'all, welcome to this week's episode of Vixen. So this episode is going to be kind of a long one, so I'm going to get right to it, but I just want to give y'all a little bit of background before we get started. So the woman we're going to be talking about today, Lithofayne Pridgon, I saw a news article about her last year. We'll get to that later. And I just kind of briefly scanned it and I was like, I don't know who this woman is. I've never heard of her, but she sounds super interesting. So I added her to my list. And then when I started working on the episodes for this season, I was like, oh no, I have to include her. So I don't know how many of y'all will actually recognize her name or like know anything about her. But even if you don't know anything about her, y'all, stick around. Because I know some of y'all listen to the episodes of like people whose name you recognize. But y'all, even though you may not know who this woman is, when I say this woman's story is insane, like literally, I've never been more entertained writing an episode, ever. So when I say like it's worth it, y'all, listen to it, even if you don't know who it is. Like y'all, for my Real Housewives fan out there, I actually was telling a friend of mine this when I was working on this episode. If she was a Real Housewife, Lithofayne, she would have like 20 storylines. Like she would literally carry the season on her back. Like I don't know if y'all are watching the Real Housewives of Miami reboot, but you know how Alexia is literally carrying them on her back with all of her storylines, her telenovela life. Same thing here. Like if she was a housewife, she would carry the season. That's how interesting her life is. So I just wanted to preface the episode with that. And then quickly go over sources. So I had two main sources for this episode. One of them was a 2015 article from The Guardian. It was called Lithofayne Pridgon, Jimi Hendrix Original Foxy Lady by Chris Campion. Y'all are going to hear me mention that a lot. So just, you're going to hear me say The Guardian, like just ignore it. So that was a really helpful source. Also, there's a book called Becoming Jimi Hendrix from Southern Crossroads to Psychedelic London, The Untold Story of a Musical Genius. That book was written in 2010 by Stephen Roby and Brad Schreiber, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. That book is really good. It's chock full of information. I know like there are a lot of really awesome Jimi Hendrix books out there, but this one was really good, and it had a lot of information specifically about Lithofayne, more than I've seen like anywhere else. So if you still want more Lithofayne after this episode, I suggest you read that book because it was chock full of info. It would be too long if I included everything they had about her in the book. But yeah, if you want to know more after this episode, I suggest you read the book. I highly recommend it. And that was everything. So let's go ahead and get into the episode. In Southwest Georgia, there's a city called Moultrie, home to a neighborhood called Dirty Spoon. So Dirty Spoon was smack dab between a railroad line and a cemetery. And it got its name because it was basically an alley with a dead end, and it was shaped like a spoon. The neighborhood was diverse, it was poor, and it was known for having a good time. So there was a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, lots of moonshine, juke joints, and there was a ton of unwed women who called Dirty Spoon home. And y'all know that was a big deal back in the 1930s. In 1940, Lithofayne Pridgon was born in Dirty Spoon to one of those unwed women the neighborhood was known for, and to a man who was constantly on the road working as a hoofer on Broadway or as backup for Katherine Dunham and Eartha Kitt. Faye, as she was called, and you'll hear me refer to her as Faye throughout the rest of the episode, was their only child, saying the only thing they had in common was her. So her parents were like not together. I don't think they really knew each other like that. The only thing they had in common was that they now shared a daughter. So Faye rarely saw her father, and her mother was sent away immediately to attend the missionary college in Springfield, Massachusetts, as punishment for having a child out of wedlock. And this happened a lot. Like, the family would send the girl away. Sometimes they would have her come back. Sometimes they wouldn't. But if they had her come back, they would make it seem like, you know, this child was like her sister or something like that. It was crazy, but this happened a lot back then. Faye was sent to live with her father's mother in Crosstown, a middle-class neighborhood in Moultrie. So, random fact, y'all. So her grandmother, the woman that she went to live with, she was rumored to be the illegitimate love child of Henry Ford, which is This is just storyline number one, y'all. But anyway, so this rumor was never proven, but honestly, it probably was true because her grandmother had a lot of land, and her having all of this land did not correlate to the money that she had or like the money that her family had. So it didn't make sense, if y'all get what I'm saying. So the grandmother worked as a washer, like she just washed people's clothes for them. But she had all of this land, so that I think that's like how the rumor kind of sparked. It was probably other things too, but that is why people think it was true. Faye's grandmother tried to keep her away from Dirty Spoon, saying, and I quote, that it was full of decadence and the dregs of humanity. Sounds like a fun place. After hearing a song called Boogie Chillin' by John Lee Hooker, Faye fell in love with blues music, counting him, Elmore James, and Muddy Waters as her favorites. So she was also really, really fascinated by Dirty Spoon, because to keep it real, like, who wouldn't be? Especially, like, in 1940s Georgia, like, come on. And you're into music, you love music, and like this is the place to be. I mean, and it sounded like a good time. Sign me up. I might want to go to Dirty Spoon and party. I wouldn't live there, but I would turn up in Dirty Spoon. So Faye spent a lot of her days picking cotton and just thinking about Dirty Spoon and blues music and all of that. But in the summer, she would get some real excitement in her life, y'all. So in the summer, Faye would go to Massachusetts to spend time with her mother, who worked at a life insurance company full-time, and she was also a full-time party girl. Like, Faye's mama was in them streets. She was lit, y'all. She knew every artist that came through the city. Like, anytime somebody came through on the Chitlin Circuit, y'all know what the Chitlin Circuit is. Anytime someone would come to town, she knew them, or she was like hosting them, or she would have like large parties at her house for them. Like, Faye's mother was, you know, she was kind of like a connection person. She was the plug, basically. And her mother told everybody that came around that Faye was her little sister, not her daughter. One of those summers Faye spent with her mom up north set the tone for the next few years of her life. Not only would Faye's mom let her attend the parties that she held at the home, they also went out together quite often. So in 1955, when Faye was 15, she went with her mother to a show at the Roseland Ballroom. Her mom was dating the leader of the band at the time, so they were able to meet the main event, Little Willie John. Here's a quote from Faye from that 2015 article she did with The Guardian. My mama was going with the band leader, so that's how I met Willie. My first kiss and everything. And his daddy was traveling with him. I remember he had a silver streak through his hair. Little Willie John was a singer from Detroit who was becoming more and more popular by the day at this time. I had never heard of him before this, but his story is really interesting and very sad, so I'm going to just share it real quick with y'all. When Faye met him, he was only 17, obviously, you know, and he was being accompanied by his father to the show. And he was on his way to being a really big star. But unfortunately, his career was cut short due to alcohol abuse, and he spent his last days in prison in Washington State after killing a man in self-defense. He was only 30 years old when this happened, and James Brown actually has an album named after him. It's called Thinking About Willie John and a Few Nice Things. Faye was quickly enamored with Willie John, and she told everyone that she knew him personally. Like, when she got back to Dirty Spoon, she was telling everybody, like, she knew him, they were friends. So much so that when her cousin back home told her, like, hey, Willie John is coming to Dirty Spoon, he's going to be playing nearby, she traveled all the way back to Georgia to see him again. Faye said this about Willie John in that interview. He was totally uninhibited, super free spirit, wasn't scared, didn't feel threatened by anything or anybody. Totally streetwise, and could sing his ass off. So when she returned to Dirty Spoon to watch Willie John live again, he introduced her to James Brown, who she would remain friends with, and eventually she goes on tour with him, but we'll talk about that later. Faye and Willie John kept in close contact, and the next year, he invited her up to Harlem to stay with him. The two went to a party at the Cecil Hotel. So y'all, the Cecil was a known haven for like all of the talent, all of the musical geniuses, the whole Chitlin Circuit, and they would come and stay at this hotel whenever they came to Harlem, or even just hang out there because there were always parties happening. It was an apartment-style hotel, and it was directly above a very famous jazz spot called Minton's Playhouse, so naturally, you know, it was the place to see and be seen. So anyway, Willie John took Faye to a party here where she met her next man. Y'all might know him. I don't know if y'all know him. His name is Sam Cooke. But yes, y'all, she met her next man through her current man, and y'all will see that this is a recurring theme throughout Faye's life. But in her defense, in her defense, I will say they say the best way to meet a partner is through people you already know. They don't specify if it's a boyfriend or like an ex or a flame, but they do say that. So, hey. So here's what Faye had to say about it. He had no problem displaying me. He'd call me his woman, but I wasn't anybody's woman, end quote. And like I said, y'all, remember this about Faye for later on in the story. So anyway, let's get back to this party. Faye had separated from Willie John and was wandering through the party by herself when Sam grabbed her by the hand from a dark area and just kissed her. So from that point on, Sam kind of took Faye under his wing. Willie John, the strong black man that he was, clearly, he did not mind that Faye started seeing Sam. He felt like as long as he knew what was going on, he was fine with it, as long as you kept him abreast, I guess. He was quite the ladies' man himself. I'm sure of it. Everybody was at this time. Like, everybody was seeing multiple people getting their rocks off. So I can kind of understand why this wouldn't be a super big deal. And, you know, Faye and Sam hit it off so much so, y'all, that Faye's mama moved to New York and started seeing Sam's brother. Like, this is how well they got along. I was trying to find out how old Faye's mom was when she had her, but I wasn't sure. As you guys can see, Willie John bringing Faye to New York was really all she needed to start building her own buzz, her own social circle, her own career, her own everything, really. So early in the 60s, she toured the country as a backup singer with Bobby Blue Bland's group. The Bland Dolls is what they were called. Faye is the first person to say, you know, she was hired here more for her looks and for her like aura, like her superstar like quality. I will post an interview with her so you guys can like just see like the charisma that she has, because I feel like once y'all see her like in motion, you'll really get it. And yeah, she was like, this is why they hired me. It really wasn't because of my voice. She calls her own voice a 1-octave singing range. So she understood, you know, she had the look and that's why she got the job, but she was touring for a while. She started hanging around drug dealers, superstars, crooked cops, musicians, hustlers, you name it. She goes on to befriend people like Marvin Gaye, Ike Turner, and one of her closest friends was actually Etta James. The two met through Willie John as well. Willie John was just out here connecting people, y'all, okay? And Etta, at the time that they met, Etta had just had her first hit single take off, which was called The Wallflower. Shortly after meeting, Etta had gotten into it with one of the local gangsters, and he ended up actually fighting her, which was very common at this time, unfortunately. Like, I've seen this reflected a lot in movies and books. And sometimes like people would try to like bully people into paying for protection, especially like singers and actors paying for security protection. That's something that still happens today. So after this happened to Etta, Faye actually hooked her up with a friend of hers, a Harlem mobster named Red Dillard, for protection. And they became lifelong friends after that moment, and they were known as Thelma and Louise within their circle. In 2004, when Etta James' blues cover album, Blues to the Bone, was released, Faye wrote in the liner notes that she and Etta were, and this is a quote, probably among the first liberated modern day black females, end quote. So love that. Do y'all think we need an Etta James episode? Let me know if y'all want that. Faye continued to see both Willie John and Sam, even adding Otis Redding to the mix at one point. She has very fine men under her belt, y'all. Super fine men. Here's another quote from that interview that we just have to discuss real quick. We would frequent the same kind of places and run into each other here and there now and then. And there were always cute guys, cute girls on the scene. Everybody was young and energetic. And so if you saw somebody you liked, you kind of just hooked up with them, took them with you. You take the young tenders in and just party to your heart's content. Sometimes a set, she's talking about a party, we about to get to that, lasted 2 or 3 days. So I just wanted to share that quote with y'all so y'all can kind of understand like the nature of like why this was happening, like why these men, it's not that they didn't care that she dated other men. Maybe some of them didn't, but just like this is the culture, this is the atmosphere. Everybody's kind of just like hooking up and like, oh, come live with me. You come live with this person for a few days and move on and rotate. Like it was a lot going on at this time, y'all. Lots of free love, okay? So in 1962, a 19-year-old aspiring musician came to Harlem to try to get put on in the scene. He was skinny, young, fresh out of the military and carried an old guitar case with him everywhere he went, as if he would just have to pull it out and play it at a drop of a dime. One day, Faye ran out to run some errands for her mother, and on her way home, she decided to stop by an apartment rented by one of her friends, Fat Jack. So let me just briefly talk about Fat Jack real quick here, y'all. He's another person with a very interesting story. So Fat Jack was a well-known drug kingpin, restaurant owner, aspiring music executive. He also did the numbers. If you're familiar with this time in New York City, you know the numbers game. Very interesting guy. He started a few record labels, and he opened up Harlem World Entertainment later on in 1977. So we're jumping ahead a little bit. But yeah, in 1977, he started this huge music venue. He originally wanted it to be like a very classy spot, but eventually, as rap music started to emerge, he started to let young rappers and DJs perform and have parties there. So he was a big part of the emergence of rap music in New York City. He kind of like, I don't know, it's giving me like Empire vibes. I kind of wonder if Empire, the show, was inspired by his story. I think somebody sued them recently. I'm not sure who, and I believe they won the case. But maybe Empire was inspired by multiple people. But when I read his story, it gave me like the plot of Empire. He was also allegedly gay. I don't know. I'm not sure. But like, apparently that was a thing as well. And he was known for throwing these wild after hours. Like, y'all, not the afters that we be going to. The afters we be going to don't have nothing on these afters. I'm talking about like the orgy afters. Not that those don't happen. They do too. I mean, I don't know nothing about that. But I'm talking like his afters was intense. So as many afters do, these parties, these after parties, would start in the wee hours of the morning, like right when the clubs and the other venues closed. And then they went on well into the day, like well into the day. So when Faye was out running these errands, it probably was like 10, 11 a.m. and they were still partying. So Faye shows up to one of these parties, of course, and she asks one of Fat Jack's men, like, who's inside? And the guy says, this is a quote, oh, you know, this little musician guy. And I said, is he a virgin? He said, no, but you'll like him. He's your type. He just knew what I liked. I liked skinny, raw-boned, overfucked, underfed-looking guys, end quote. Nothing happened between Faye and this young musician at this encounter, but they would meet again soon. So if you guys have not guessed who that musician was, it was Jimi Hendrix. It was Jimmy when he was still Jimmy. He wasn't Jimi yet. By the next year, Jimmy had pretty much moved to Harlem. He was still trying to get into the music scene there. He was hanging out at the Apollo one day when Faye came by, and she was actually coming by to see Sam Cooke, who had a show there later. Jimmy was actually trying to like angle for a gig with Sam, so that's why he was hanging out there. And as soon as Faye saw him, she knew she recognized him, and she quickly put it together like that she saw him at the orgy afters. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm gonna just call it the orgy afters from now on. She was ecstatic that they had ran into each other again, and she ended up introducing Jimmy to Sam, and then the two headed over to her mom's apartment where they talked for hours, listened to her mom's blues record collection. And later that night, the pair booked a room at the Cecil Hotel, and they were inseparable from there on out, really. Faye was super, super smitten by Jimmy, but she did not want to stop seeing anybody else that she was also seeing at the time. Jimmy was not with this at first, and I don't think he ever really was from what I read, but eventually he just kind of got over it and just like dealt with it, I guess. So this is how Faye described her love square. It ain't a triangle, y'all, it's a square, with Willie John, Sam, and Jimmy. They were all totally different than the songs they sang. They could sing the hell out of some love song, but as we used to say back then, they were all from city to city and titty to titty. I love that. That side of them appealed to me because I always loved womanizers. There were things about them that were bold and daring, yet endearing at the same time, and they allowed me to just be who I was, end quote. So this is like really the very interesting thing about Faye to me. Like just like Sam, Jimmy, and Willie and all of the other men in the scene at the time, she was exploring her sexual identity and her freedom too. Like when I described to y'all a few minutes ago, just the atmosphere of this time, women were doing it too. And she was happy with this arrangement. She called the men her repertoire. And you know, neither of these men tried to tie her down or forbid her from seeing the others, even if they were upset. So I just like this kind of woman is very fascinating to me. And the fact that she was so proud and like open about this in the 60s as a Black woman at that, it just, I love it. I love to see it. So Faye and Jimi's relationship was truly a whirlwind, y'all. They would party at Harlem hotspots. They would listen to music, analyze it together. Sometimes they would live together, but Faye would like leave after a few weeks. They had pets together, which they always named Foxy. Remember that for later. Jimi was also known to use the word Foxy to describe a good-looking chick. So, that was kind of their thing, their inside joke. I love when men say Foxy. Like, from now on, that's just what I want men to refer to me as. Faye would also work sort of like as his booking manager, securing him some gigs. She got him a few gigs backing Sam, actually. And then eventually she got him an audition for the Isley Brothers and he got the job. This is when they were doing that. I think it was called like the IB Experience. Or like, I could be confusing it with something else, but it was like another like side group that they had. So Faye and Jimi were really connected by their love for music and the knowledge that they had for music. So I think that's why they had such a close connection. So this was the early Jimi days, y'all. And Faye says that he wasn't really the womanizer a lot of us know him to be like later in his life at this time. He fell head over heels for Faye and wanted to be with her and only her, even though he had originally agreed to overlook her relationships with both Willie and Sam. Even Faye's mama had tried to warn Jimi, saying that her daughter falls in and out of love every week. Jimi would write Faye these beautiful notes, which she kept, often proclaiming his love for her while also expressing his frustration with her for not committing. In one of them, he wrote, "As I write more and more, I feel myself grow so very weak under the power of you." So from what I've read about like their relationship, you can tell that Faye is one of those people who really likes like the honeymoon stage of the relationship. Like, I don't think she got bored of the person like a lot of other people get who enjoy the honeymoon stage. But it's interesting because she's clearly very romantic from what I read, and she craved love. She just didn't want a love that would tie her down. She wanted the love to just let her be free, essentially. And she said that she loved all three of these men equally in their own individual way, but being exclusive with one of them was just out of the question for her. So it's really interesting. I want to know what you guys think. Do you think it's possible to be in love with more than one person at one time? Do you think you can love things about a certain person and then get other things from another person? Like this person fulfills you in one way and then the other person fulfills you in a different way. But I don't know. I have really mixed feelings on that, but I can also see the person on the receiving end of it being like, we have such a great time. We love each other so much. Why am I not enough? I also get that. So I don't know. It's just interesting. So also in that interview with The Guardian, model Winona Williams, who I actually need to do an episode on, I think I'll do that next season. She said this about Faye and Jimi's relationship. "He adored her to the point of distraction. You always want what you can't have. And he had her, but he didn't have her exclusively, and that drove him up the wall. Jimi would have settled down with Faye. I don't see any other woman that he would have settled down with, but Faye was not about to settle down. If Faye had said, 'Look, I want you to leave all of these women alone and we're going to do this,' he would have done it. All of these girls that think they had a part of this man's heart need to know that his whole heart belonged to Lithofayne Pridgon, but he couldn't get it." End quote. That's a strong quote. Nah. That's a strong quote. And your friend would not say that like 40 years after the fact if it wasn't like to be believed. Like there's a lot of women who are known as girlfriends of Jimi and maybe more well known as his girlfriend than Faye is or was, but I don't know, y'all. From what I read, it sounded like I agree with Winona, okay? So anyway, in the fall of 1966, the two went their separate ways for a brief time when Jimi moved to London, where a label deal and an insane amount of fame would find him. So him moving to the UK was a really, really big deal for his career. And this is like when everything truly pops off for Jimi. So he goes away to London, but he never forgot about Faye though. Like whenever he was back in New York, he would come looking for her, stopping by all the spots in Harlem that she was known to hang out at. So much so that she would stop by these spots herself and people would be like, "Girl, you better get out of here. Jimi just left. He looking for you." So in 1967, Jimi's first album as the Jimi Hendrix Experience was released. That album is called Are You Experienced? And one of its most known tracks is a little song called Foxy Lady. You may not know it. I don't know. You might not know. It's not a big deal. But Jimi has never said who Foxy Lady is about or like who it's written for or anything like that. But a lot of people are very certain that the song is about our girl Faye. So we'll talk about it a little bit. So Foxy Lady it, like, when you first hear this song, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, but in my opinion, like, it comes off as like he's just like, I don't know, talking to a woman on the street. But like when you really listen to it after I started working on this episode, I'm like, nah, he's kind of like asking for commitment in the song. So some of the lyrics are like, I've made up my mind, I'm tired of wasting all my precious time, you gotta be mine, all mine. Like, I just feel like that's enough said. That one I was like, okay, yeah, it's not him just hitting on a random woman. There are other songs on the album that are believed to be about Faye too, like "And Fire" and "Can You See Me." I feel like "Can You See Me" is probably like definitely about Faye. Like, that one really resonates. But Faye herself, she never assumed that these songs were about her, and she was pretty humble about it. Like, way more humble than I would be. Okay, if Jimi Hendrix wrote a song about me, I would be singing it from the rooftops. But she does say that he would always tell her that certain songs were about her, but she just thought, it was cute, and she didn't take it that seriously. So Faye and Jimi were not apart for very long because they constantly spent time together whenever he made it back to the States. They were kind of doing this like long distance friendship relationship thing. Jimi's third and final album, Electric Ladyland, which was released in 1968, actually has a photo of him and Faye on the inside sleeve of it. That same year, Jimi was urging Faye not to join James Brown on tour. Y'all, I was about to say Chris Brown. I'm talking about James Brown. So he did not want her to go on this tour. I really don't know why, but he just was like, no. So she went anyway, of course, because it's Faye. And when she landed back in New York City, she went straight to Jimi's apartment in the Village to smooth things over with him. And while she was on her way there, Jimi recorded himself singing about his relationship with Faye for about 30 minutes, I believe. So this tape, Faye did not know a thing about this tape for years, not until it was put up for auction by I never know how to pronounce this place. Sotheby's in London? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so it was put up for auction by Sotheby's in London in 1995. The tapes originally surfaced in 1981, and they were kept safe by another former girlfriend of Jimi's, Kathy Etchingham. So they sold to Bob Terry for £1,500, which would have been like a little over $2,000 in 1981. Wow. The Faye tape is what the one about Faye was called. It was, these tapes came up with a couple other tapes. I think there were 4 in total of Jimi's. But the Faye one was the only one that had unreleased music because he was kind of just freestyling when he did this. So that is where the tapes are now. On the night of September 18th, 1970, Faye was recording her own music at Jimi's brand new Electric Lady studio in the Village. So the last time they had seen each other was actually the month before in August when he had left for his upcoming European tour. After the session, she went back to the apartment Jimi got her in Brooklyn and stayed home the following day writing music near the apartment's large window. While she was sitting there, a squad car pulled up outside and headed up to her 3rd floor apartment. This was normal to Faye because she partied with cops all the time. The cops she was cool with, they would make a drug bust nearby and then they would bring it to her apartment so that they could party together. Y'all, it was the 70s. Like, damn near everybody was crooked, especially the cops. But anyway, today they didn't come to turn up. They had some bad news to relay to her. Jimi Hendrix was dead. Faye went into shock for about 2 weeks, not reacting until she overheard a neighbor being told her husband had died. Faye says that even though she didn't know this man, this news sent her over the edge. Probably like when you're like holding back from trauma that you've recently experienced, hearing it again for somebody else it can be the thing that really does take you over. Faye had experienced so much loss recently. Sam Cooke was murdered in 1964 and Willie John passed away. We talked about him passing away in prison. That happened in 1968. So here we are in 1970 and now Jimi's gone. I'm going to read another excerpt from The Guardian here where she spoke about all 3 of these great men that were lost way too soon. She's clearly as much in love with them now as she was then, fiercely protective over their memory and her own. I always say that they were not meant to stay here for long periods. I don't know how to explain that, but it's like their light. The light that shines the brightest burns out faster. Regardless of the controversy about how they died, I just think it was meant to be. End quote. So at this point, Faye just didn't want to be in New York anymore, understandably. And to quote that Guardian article again, she was like, I know I got the hell up out of there. That's what she said. So Faye kept pushing on, trying to figure out like what her next move would be. At the end of 1971, she made another famous friend, Sly Stone. So they met at one of his concerts at Madison Square Garden, and Sly immediately invited her to come out to LA with him. He said he wanted to work with her and, you know, do a record with her and stuff, even though he hadn't heard her sing yet. Like, as y'all can see, like I said earlier, this happens a lot for Faye. She suspected that he had other things in mind, but she agreed to come out there as long as the thing between them stayed platonic. The two flew to LA, and Faye moved right on into Sly's mansion in Bel Air. Faye had a lot of really good times during the day she spent at the mansion. She actually met Eddie Hazel from Parliament Funkadelic there, and they started dating. Like I told y'all, she has fine men on her roster. Eddie Hazel back in the day was fine. He was so taken by Faye, he once wrote a love note to her with his own blood, y'all. I would be terrified. But yes, that happened. This relationship actually inspired Faye to get more creative and write more music. Also, while she was living at the mansion, she filmed for the 1973 documentary titled Jimi Hendrix. I will post the footage on Instagram. They did an interview of her, and that's the one I was talking about when I was like, I want y'all to be able to like see her aura, see like, you know, her star power. So I'm going to post the footage from that documentary on Instagram. Y'all, Sly's ass was wilding out at this time, but again, it was the 70s and he is Sly Stone. So they never got around to doing a record together, but Faye did basically become his live-in babysitter, his caretaker, and he needed her a lot. He kind of was very, very dependent on her. She actually wrote a few songs while she was there. One was called Placidal Sil. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I think that's like a drug. And it just kind of talked about Sly's penchant for sleeping pills. He was always taking sleeping pills. One time, Faye left to go visit Etta James, and she came back to a horrific scene. Sly's entourage was standing outside, afraid to go in because Sly had shot the mansion up, y'all. He had shot the damn place up. So she's the only person that's brave enough to go inside. So she goes in and she sees him just sitting on his bed, smack dab in the middle, with a gun just sitting next to him. Just sitting there, looking at the wall. Here's a description of what happened directly from Faye. "Where you been?" he demanded. "I almost lost my fucking mind. Don't ever go off like that again." She told him, "People keep asking, what did you do before you got me?" "Tell them motherfuckers I suffered," Lithofayne says, mimicking Sly's gravel voice. At this point, she realized his dependency had taken a dangerous turn. "I thought, oh shit, it's time to go," end quote. Faye knew she had to get the hell out of Dodge when it came to Sly, but she just kind of stuck around, lingered around a little bit longer, trying to figure out what she was going to do next. But this living arrangement did not last long. The decision kind of got made for her. So one day, Faye's father called her saying that a friend in the LAPD force had tipped him off that Sly's house was currently under surveillance. So remember, Faye's dad was in the entertainment industry himself. He had been a backup dancer, a hoofer, all of that. So it made sense that he knew some LAPD cops because a lot of people in the entertainment industry knew cops, and it was, you know, useful to be, you know, close with some police officers. So in December of 1972, she found out that her daddy was right because the mansion was raided and Sly was arrested for failure to produce identification. So this is when she finally gets the hell out of Dodge. And here's what she said about it a few years ago. "I think I was just protected, universally protected. I have it in my chart because I was very stupid. I could have been in any of many of the things I've known to go down. And here I am about to be 75 years old," end quote. So yes, I'll just mention Faye was very into astrology, so that's why she's like, I have it in my chart. But yeah, I think as women, we've all been in situations that were like, we look back and we're like, why was I there? That was so stupid, so dangerous. And living with Sly was just one of those things. In 1972, Ahmet Ertegun, I think I might be pronouncing his last name wrong. In 1972, Ahmet Ertegun, the founder of Atlantic Records, heard Faye sing a few songs that she had written herself, and he found her very refreshing. Those are his words. The next year, Ahmet signed Faye to Atlantic, and she recorded a full album with Shuggie Otis, who he is a famous guitarist in his own right, but also the son of Johnny Otis. So Faye recorded her album with him and the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. This album, unfortunately, was never released, and Faye never got like pushed by the label. There was no promo or anything like that. And after the deal fell through, Faye just decided to let go of the superstar dreams and put herself through school to study music instead. Because as y'all saw, ever since she was a kid, she just loved music. Faye remained in LA after coming there with Sly, staying all the way up until the mid-90s. So once she got there with Sly, she never left LA. But in the mid-90s, she did move to Las Vegas. So she, just stayed on the West Coast. Not much is known about what Faye was up to at this time, but she did remain tight with all of her musician friends. She continued to write, and she eventually started her own family. She had 2 daughters, Vicky Walls and Lithofayne Ramsey, and 1 son whose name is Quinn Pridgon. So throughout the 70s all the way to the 2010s, Faye was asked to contribute to a lot of projects that are focused on Jimi Hendrix, and she actually does quite a few of them. To name a few, there's the album Martin Scorsese Presents The Blues Jimi Hendrix. She contributed to the show American Masters, and she did the documentary Hear My Train A-Comin'. So Faye was more than happy to contribute to a lot of these projects, but she didn't really want to do a lot of interviews. And that was because she just didn't trust anybody to tell her story correctly. So she started to write her own book, her own memoir. In 2013, she was portrayed by actress Claire Hope Ashiti in the film All Is By My Side, which focused on Jimi's move from New York to London. Y'all know that was like the pivotal move that really made Jimi Hendrix Jimi Hendrix. This is the movie. I had to look this up because I was like, what? But then I realized this is the movie where Andre 3000 plays Jimi. Like, I don't know why this feels like a fever dream to me. I feel like it almost feels like this movie never came out, but it did. Like, do you guys feel like that? Like, who saw this movie? If you've seen it, please let me know. But yeah, I remember like it being a big deal that Andre was going to play Jimi, and everyone was like, yes, perfect for the role, perfect for the role. But then I don't remember like the movie coming out or having a buzz. But it seems like from my research, it did come out, but it kind of flopped. The reviews are kind of all over the place. Most of them are negative, but people say that Andre 3000 did a really good job in this movie. I'm going to try to find it later tonight, and once the episode goes live, we can talk about it in the comments or something like that. But yeah, I'm interested to see, because I don't know if Faye's ever been portrayed in any other like fictional take about Jimi. But yeah, this is interesting. I actually want to watch it. But if you have seen it, please let me know. Y'all, I would have thought this movie never saw the light of day. I cannot believe it actually came out. But anyway, you would think that Faye would have been like very heavily involved in this movie, since it details like that time in his life that she was a very big part of, but I just can't find anything that says she was involved or that she approved of the film, or like her thoughts or anything. I'm curious to know. On April 22nd, 2021, Lithofayne Pridgon died at her home in Vegas at the age of 80, survived by her 3 children, 2 granddaughters, and 1 great-grandson. So here, y'all, I just want to share some quotes from friends, from people who knew and loved Miss Faye. So let's get into that. This is a condensed quote from Bootsy Collins, also of Parliament Funkadelic. She just had a presence, a certain power that would come over you. She was an amazing person, one of a kind. She helped change my life and tons of others. This quote is from John McDermott, who is the catalog manager of Experience Hendrix. Faye was an extraordinary lady. We began a friendship more than 30 years ago, which continued right up to her recent passing. Her contributions to the books I have authored about Jimi Hendrix were invaluable. Her perspective was always illuminating, and her demand for accuracy never waned. Her contribution to the Hear My Train A-Comin' documentary was immensely important, providing first-hand accounts of Jimi Hendrix's history from a vantage point that no one else had. We fans owe her a debt of gratitude for sharing this information. And last but not least, this quote is from Greg Tate, the author of Midnight Lighting, Jimi Hendrix and the Black Experience. Love this one. This one was my favorite. She was nobody's concubine. This is somebody who was as much of a superstar as any of the men she dated, as a Black woman in this world and at that time in the world. End quote. So y'all, that is the story of Lithofayne Pridgon, also known as Fayne, also known as Faye. This was an Really, really fun story to research and write. Really dynamic woman. I would have loved to meet her. Just her life, like the way that she lived her life was just so, not only inspiring, but it's just like, it was fascinating to me. So I hope that y'all enjoyed this episode. I really, really wish that, you know, she could have finished her memoir before her passing. Maybe one day we'll get it, like somebody can finish it, or someone that she trusts, maybe one of her daughters or something. But yeah, we really needed that memoir. We needed that memoir. And I think it says a lot that people like John McDermott, who has done a lot of projects based on Jimi, says, you know, she has firsthand accounts from like a perspective that they've never heard from anybody else who knew Jimi or was involved with Jimi. I'm not trying to like put the girlfriends against each other or anything, but I just think it speaks volumes that this was said by him. And all the quotes that I read, everybody had great things to say about this woman, and her story was really interesting. She led a very dynamic life, a very inspiring life, a fun life. She really lived her life to the fullest, because the 60s and 70s, child. Okay. But yes, I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode and had just as much fun as I did writing as you did listening. Please let me know your thoughts. Always hit me up on Instagram. We can talk about the episodes. You can email me at VIXENPODCAST@gmail.com with submissions, suggestions, anything else. Also, you guys, if y'all enjoy the podcast, please leave a review. Leave a review. It helps a lot when you guys leave reviews. I love when y'all do that. I'm trying to like figure out something that I can do to show my appreciation to people who write reviews. So if you write one and you know you want to like just give me a heads up, or DM me on Instagram, or email me just to let me know. I'm trying to figure out like what I want to do. I want to do something special for y'all. Thank you so much for taking the time out to not only listen, but also to leave a review. You guys say such kind things. It honestly makes my day whenever I see a new one. But yeah, so next week's episode is going to be a little different, y'all. Kind of want to give y'all a hint, but I'm trying to figure out like how I can give y'all a hint without like giving it away. Oh, we're going to do like an investigative episode, y'all. It's similar to like the sex tape scandals episode that you've heard me do. Similar to the, you know, the Instagram baddie effect episode, that series. We're going to do something like that. I ain't going to say what we're talking about though. You might know, you might not, but I'm excited for that. So we'll take a little bit of a break and just do a palate cleanser with the investigative, putting my Nancy Drew hat on. But yeah, I'm excited for that episode too. Thank you guys so much for all of the love, all of the support. And I will see y'all next week for a brand new episode. Bye. Thank you for listening to Vixen. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a review. If you have a submission, feel free to email VIXENPODCAST@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode.